Greetings, friends. Welcome to the Shed and Beam. I'm Thaddeus Williams. There is so much hype. There's a whole lot of misunderstanding, hysteria, bad blood, false propaganda swirling around the topic of progressivism, aka leftist ideology, or if we're speaking historically, Marxism. And I've seen a lot of misunderstanding coming, particularly from dear Christian brothers and sisters on the right who have sort of a bumper sticker level understanding of what leftism really is, where it came from, how it gained its ascendancy. And so I brought in a scholar, world-class expert on leftist ideology. He has a new book that dropped called The Progressive Miseducation of America. I'm speaking of Dr. Corey Miller. Corey Miller studied under one of the world's leading Marxist philosophers. He has 3 master's degrees. He's got a PhD in philosophy from Purdue University. He is no lightweight. And I want on this channel to bring clarity to a lot of the skirmishes and clashes in our society by not just settling for the sound bites, but being willing to do a deep dive and learn at the feet of some experts who have committed their adult lives and their academic careers to thinking about things like leftism. So I've done a lot of that. I've been speaking about critical theories, critical race theory, critical gender theory, critical legal studies. I've been teaching on this stuff since before it was cool, or before I should say it was as combustible as it is now, teaching at it on all this stuff at the academic, at the graduate level, at a law school here in Southern California. And so you're about to watch 2 scholars who have spent a lion's share of their academic careers studying leftist ideology down to its roots, down to its origins. And so I want you to understand, having worked in this heated space for a long time, it is very easy to assume the worst of others. That, oh, Williams must be releasing content on progressivism, on leftism, and on Marxism because, I describe this in one of my books as the Newman effect. So you're saying you don't care about racism. So you're saying you're a misogynist. So you're saying you support the exploitation of the poor. And so you're saying you're a red hat touting MAGA enthusiast Christian nationalist. And I hear these charges almost on a weekly basis. It sort of makes me chuckle. And this video is a way of helping set the record straight to say, look, the reason I regularly release content and publish against leftism, as I often do against right-wing ideology that I think is unworthy of the name of Christ, the reason I do this about leftism is because I've done my homework like Dr. Corey Miller, and we both found that this stuff is destructive, dangerous, and false. And so please listen to this with an open mind, step into the Shed and Beam, and add a little meaning to your day. I am here with Dr. Corey Miller. Good to have you. Welcome to the Shed.
Beautiful being here.
Thank
the famous Shed.
First in-person, in-studio, in-Shed interview, and it couldn't have been with a more solid brother.
Sure.
We got, this is 5-time author or 6-time author? Which book is this?
Six.
6-time author. The Progressive Miseducation of America, Confronting the Cultural Revolution from the Classroom to Your Community. And man, oh man, I'm stoked to have you because you're a rare bird, man. You're 7th generation Mormon. Your relative was a bodyguard for Joseph Smith. Is that right?
Evidently a failed bodyguard.
A failed bodyguard. That didn't go too well, as
No.
Joseph Smith was gunned down. Or martyred, depending who you're talking to. And then 3 master's degrees in philosophy,
Bib studies, philosophy of religion and ethics from Talbot. And then
you were there at the same program under J.P. Moreland.
Yeah. And then philosophy, but it was a 5-year philosophy degree, master's at Purdue, because I lost my first one. I was told I had too much of a faith perspective when I was ABD.
You strike me as a troublemaker, that I can see that. And then didn't you get
top secret doesn't go well with me.
You're just toxic, Corey. Let's just say it. Didn't you get harassed by some of the professors or some of the Marxist elite at some of the universities? Weren't they like calling you in the middle of the night? And
I had colleagues, grad students, that would call me and prank me in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Those guys have since gone on, done all kinds of craziness, written numerous books on anarchy. I've had Texas congressmen call me about them to do character assessments. That's how crazy they were. But I took Marxism there, and from a distinguished professor of philosophy, himself a Marxist. And that's where I started to see, wow, this is real. I studied liberation theology in seminary, and I thought, that stuff's never going to come here. It's going to be in some backwoodsy area in Central and South America.
Yeah.
But once I get into the classroom and I'm seeing at the highest level at Purdue, this is what's coming next.
Yeah.
I started to wake up, and I was trained like you in analytic philosophy at Talbot.
Yeah.
This is continental philosophy, and this is what a lot of our brothers in arms in philosophy think, that it was just going to die the death of a lack of oxygen. So who wants to even think about continental philosophy? They wanted to just do analytic. And I think that's partly why so many of our gatekeepers of thought failed to see the enemy's thought currents coming through in this one. They had just dismissed it.
I think when you and I, when were you at Talbot MA philosophy program?
2001.
Okay. So almost the same. We probably overlapped. We've been sitting next to each other,
Right.
just not realized because we were too enamored at J.P. Moreland.
That's right.
His dashing good looks. But I remember so much of that program. The ethics side of it was dealing with like the Peter Singers and the naturalists. I don't remember anything dealing with Marcuse and the critical theorists.
Right.
The metaphysics stuff from JP was world-class. The philosophy of mind stuff, world-class.
Absolutely.
Because strategically at that time, we had seen what I call the British invasion in higher education. I have in mind here Brits like Charles Darwin, right? David Hume, who said, if you take in your hand any volume, like if we grab a book off my shelf here and read any sentence, and that sentence is not empirical science or mathematical, cast it to the flames, says David Hume. The irony, of course, is if you grab David Hume's book off the shelf, which I think is somewhere behind you over there, and read that sentence, if it's not science, if it's not math, cast it to the flames. Okay, David Hume, into the flames you go, right? So you have the British invasion, and then, Bertrand Russell, A.J. Ayer with the logical positivists and the emotivists coming in to the academy. That became all the rage in American higher education. And so talk to me just a bit about how the British invasion swept through like our Harvards, and they have to now rebrand their schools to the science of psychology, or it can't just be divinity, the school of divinity. Talk to me how that first wave came, the British invasion.
Well, so in my book, I focus a bit more not on the Brits, though you're absolutely right about that. And that was, much of our heritage. But because the most formally educated country in the history of the world at the time was Germany, when we didn't have PhD programs, we sent our best and brightest over the Atlantic, some to Britain, but a whole lot of them went to Germany.
Yeah.
And that's where you have people like Immanuel Kant, you have Schleiermacher, the father of modern liberal theology, you get Hegel, Bultmann, Freud, Nietzsche, Marx, Engels, Feuerbach, all of these ghouls that then pushed these mush minds that were bright into form. And then they came back over to the U.S. between 1880 and 1930 was that fight for the universities. And they won. And we got pushed out, and you had to go start Biola and Wheaton and Calvin and several schools like that, sort of a tactical retreat.
And that lasted So the time you and I were in graduate school, those naturalists, those secular humanists, those reductivists held the positions of power for 80 years at that point. But then comes, after the British invasion, what most of your book is diving into. So you have what I call the French invasion. This is when Jacques Derrida comes and relocates to Yale, right? Michel Foucault relocates from Paris out to Berkeley, and they bring in deconstructionism and postmodernity, which is a lot of what we're seeing manifest now, followed on the heels, and this is where your book really shines, with what I call the German invasion. The German, going back to Karl Marx, right? Marxism begins its slow march through the institutions, and then the Frankfurt School with Herbert Marcuse and folks like that.
Mhm.
So, which is what seemed to blindside us in the 2010s. Is like, where's all this coming from?
Right. Yep.
You tell us the story of like, these wheels were in motion long before your kid was putting pronouns into their Twitter profile. So give us a bit of that intellectual genealogy of how we got to, the 2020s, where the obscure philosophy of somebody like Derrida or Marcuse is now what a typical 18-year-old believes about gender and reality and meaning. Tell us that story.
Yeah, and there's so much there, but when Marcuse wrote the Eros and Civilization, a philosophical thesis on Sigmund Freud, it's really the integration then of this new Marxism and Freudian sexuality. So it's a Freudian Marxist synthesis. You had them in the North, and then you had what I would say is the Italian invasion too, without feet. And that's because Gramsci was imprisoned his whole life, writing the prison notes, but those eventually got spread into the English-speaking world in my state of Indiana at Notre Dame University by a Marxist professor named Joseph Buttigieg, Mayor Pete's dad.
That name should ring a bell.
Yeah, and so Pete wasn't just giving us homosexuality, he was giving us queer critical theory.
Yeah.
And within about 15 years of, the northern axis powers of Marxists and the southern axis powers there in Italy, within about 15 years, you had Foucault and Derrida and Lyotard in France. And the odd thing there is you think that, postmoderns is sort of characterized as relativists. Their politics ought to be everything from extreme right to extreme left, but they were all hard left. They were what was called the new left. And on further inspection, they were members or at least sympathizers with the French Communist Party. So I kind of call them the Vichy government. And so you had all of that then shipped over to the U.S. at our best schools, and these guys are putting out their literature, but most of them are inside the social sciences and the humanities. That first revolution, scientific naturalism, that's where we saw all the titles changing from politics to political science and from psychology to the Department of Psychological Sciences. Everything was about science. These guys went into the social sciences and the humanities and came through the 50s and the 60s and even the 70s, culminating in doing some bank bombings and things like that. But the culture wasn't ready for it. They might be ready for it now, but they weren't ready for it then. And so at that point, Marcuse was saying, the infiltration, the long march through the institutions needs to continue, but the workers of the world that you need to unite and throw off the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, they now need to be not the factory workers on the floor. They need to be the academics.
Yeah, the elites.
Yes. And so they saw something. Gramsci's wisdom was there all along, talking about the division between civil society and political society, where civil society was about academia, media, ecclesia, church, and political society was government, law enforcement, military. In the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, those were ready for frontal assaults. But they couldn't figure out why in the West the revolution didn't happen here. as Marx had predicted it was supposed to, right? In France and in England and maybe in America.
So you're saying just the original Marxist split between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the economic vision, the all-encompassing economic vision of Marx's dialectical materialism didn't quite pan out the way that Marxists hoped. And so if I hear you right, you're saying that the new left pivoted, and with guys like Herbert Marcuse and even John Money and Wilhelm Reich and Alfred Kinsey are all sort of at the same time making this turn. You get
50s,
second
60s.
wave feminism coming along, and now it's creating what nowadays is, in a way, the air we breathe, right? The assumption that because of your skin tone, you need to sit down and shut up, or because of your XY chromosomes, you need to sit down and shut up, or because of your cis heteronormativity, you need to sit down and shut up. You're saying, even as this stuff seemingly broke, like the dam breaking, and about 2014 was a real pivotal year, you're saying, man, oh man, this was a carefully laid strategy that generalized Marxism from economics to all of life. But here's my question on that.
Yeah, cultural Marxism.
Yeah, cultural
Western
Marxism. This has always baffled me, because you and I have made it the better part of our academic careers to study this phenomena. I read Foucault, I read Marcuse, and make no mistake, in the 60s, like the hippie generation, they walked around with a copy of Marcuse. Like the hippies had Marcuse's One-Dimensional Man in their back pocket. They were reading this stuff. And it blows my mind, Corey. Please enlighten me. How, like, if you, to any listeners out there, you ever have insomnia, pick up anything by Jacques Derrida. It is so terse and needlessly obscurantist, and it reads like garbled nonsense. How these thinkers were able to capture the imagination of young hippies. And now it blows my mind hearing all the statistics about young people going off. Help me out. What are the ratios of left-leaning professors to anybody with anything resembling conservative?
Yeah, I think you get people like Steven Pinker and Jonathan Haidt that do the data on that and show that in the mid-90s it was about 2.3 to 1, which is still significant when you get 100 professors in a room.
Diversity.
Yeah, but you will have pushback, so you can't just get away with saying some stupid thing without getting called on the carpet for it. But right when that wave was starting to crest, this new movement coming out of the social sciences and the humanities was moving into position so that, 2 decades later, as you mentioned, 2014, 15, BLM comes out in 2015. Obama changes the platform to include homosexuality and so forth in the Democratic Party. Right at that time, they were making their move, and this new movement is playing more on the sentiments. Whereas the first revolution was about scientific naturalism. It was very dry, and maybe it culminated with Richard Dawkins as the French Revolution's Robespierre. He was trying to behead everyone, and he got beheaded by his own guillotine. These new revolutionaries coming in.
That's
now.
Lewis's concept of the men without chests, an abolition of men, right? Where you extract the organ. Your sentiments are the enemy. You need to be factual and scientific. And so that's Dawkins. But now you're saying the turn went from, oh, those are just sentiments, those have no value, to now, what matters for the standard of truth? Just your sentiments. Or your feelings reign supreme. So how do those ideas, again, that seem very obscure and obtuse, capture the imagination of the hippie generation and capture the imagination of so many young people today? It just baffles me how these young people have never heard of Foucault are learning to see everything through the prism of power differentials. Like, can you connect some of those dots? You've worked with young people, college students for a long time. What resonates? What sticks? What rings true?
Well, sex does.
There's that.
And, Freud talked about polymorphous perversity, and Marcuse didn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah.
And so they are wanting to totally sexualize the entire culture because we weren't responding properly to the Marxist revolution. We didn't realize how bad we had it. We thought we had it great. So they decided they were going to amp up on that, and they wanted to expose us to all kinds of pornography, all kinds of sexuality. I mean, Hugh Hefner was reading Marcuse, right? And then you get Alfred Kinsey, who's got the experimentation on 18-month-olds and erections. And they just, speaking about an erection, and they erected a statue of Kinsey in Indiana University. That's right. Not long ago.
People just don't know this stuff. Like, Kinsey was a documented pedophile. John Money, another father of the sexual variant of critical theory and trans ideology and queer critical theory, all this stuff, documented pedophile. Foucault and Derrida both went on record to support abolishing laws against pedophilia in France. You can go down the list.
And now we know that Foucault used to rape little immigrant children on the tombstones and throw money at them. And then he died, of course, of AIDS.
Yeah. One of the first public figures to die of AIDS. I mean, when I was researching my social justice book, it was so depressing having to do a deep dive into some of these guys. And my Don't Follow Your Heart book, I went through and showed how Derrida, miserable human being. What's the guy? Wilhelm Reich, who coined the term sexual revolution. Such a creep, suicidal, just like Michel Foucault was suicidal through his whole life, and ended up just self-destructing in the most grotesque and perverse way when he threw himself into the underground gay scene, the bondage scene, the BDM scene. Like, that's another thing that just baffles me, Corey, is like these ideas, not only do I not see that they did scholarly research to determine that male and female are non-binary, like to make an extraordinary claim like that, you would expect extraordinary evidence. It's just not there. So not only is the ideology, like on an intellectual level, weighed and found wanting, but you just look at the kind of dudes they were, and it's like, it blows my mind that we're letting little kids learn the genderbread person, knowing the architects of this idea were just people you wouldn't want within 100 yards of a child. And I document this in one of my videos. I'll link below. The why true love demands that we oppose trans ideology. Why do people fall for this?
This base sexuality that human nature has. I mean, in the Old Testament, when they had laws against bestiality, sex with animals, they wouldn't have to have laws if people weren't practicing it. And at this juncture in our history right now, I think 49 out of 50 states now have laws on the books. Hawaii, one of the most recent to follow, because they said, one of their congressmen said, we are becoming a exotic destination for this stuff. But, there's sinful nature, and now finally we have academics giving some rationale behind it, supporting it, wanting to do what we want to do. We go through the sexual revolution, and it sort of gets pushed back a little bit. The race part, with MLK on being colorblind instead of being preoccupied with color. But the sexuality, it got stopped a little bit, but they said we need to ensconce ourselves into the institutions, into academia. From there, once it's ripe, then they'll go out into the political world, into media, and then eventually into ecclesia. So within 2 decades of that 2.3 to 1, It then became now 23-1 or 27-1 at the Ivy League. So all the parents who want to have the
27-1
bumper sticker. Yeah. I was just at Princeton last week, and that's where, Peter Singer is at.
Yeah.
And he's got that famous article, Dearest Pet.
Yep.
So long as it's mutually consensual and there's no harm inflicted on the animal, there's no harm and no foul on a Friday night date with your pet Fido.
Wow.
But that's, and then
I hope this video doesn't get taken down, because we're just telling the truth about how dark darkness can get.
Yeah.
Right? This is, and to me, I'm a theologian / philosopher / culture commentator / whatever, but theology is really my bread and butter. And when you're talking, Corey, you're giving like a modern history. Here's what's gone on the last 100+ years. But
yeah,
you
and
made
it's gone really fast recently.
and it's gone real fast recently. But you said something in your last comment that to me takes me right back to Romans 1. Like my question was, why does this stuff catch? Why does the flame? What's the tinder that makes this flame catch in a society? I loved your response of just like, especially with young people, sex, and you read Kinsey and his human behavior, sexual behavior of the human male, volume 1, sexual behavior of the human female, volume 2, became a Bible of the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
And people were eating up Marcuse and all this stuff. And I love he just boil it down to like, these are young people with like testosterone and estrogen pumping through their systems. But to me, it goes all the way back to Romans 1, where Paul puts this whole conversation in its deepest theological context, right? He says, they no longer worshiped and served the Creator, to whom is due all glory and praise. They worshiped and served the creation. And that switch from creator worship to creation worship, according to Paul, what's one of the first manifestations of that? Their women gave up natural relations with women, their men gave up. And so sexuality is cosmic and theological in a profound sense. That creator worship says, okay, God created this beautiful distinction between male and female, and he created sex as this amazing gift, but you erase the creator-creature distinction, and then you can erase all the other distinctions.
Take away all constraints.
Exactly. And so there's a theological underpinning to the culture war issues that pop up here. The issue behind the issue, behind the issue, behind the issue, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is creator versus creation worship. Am I Looney Tunes here? Am I wacky?
No. One of my atheist friends, Peter Boghossian, that we've talked about before, he wrote the book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. He was the one who first turned me on to this book. He sent it to me because the subtitle was Beyond Apologetics. So I said, you're going to love this. And it's by Lynn Tonstad. She's got a mohawk. She's a lesbian at Yale Divinity School. So not just Yale University, but the Divinity School. And it's called Queer Theology Beyond Apologetics. And she tells her students in that class, it's based on a class she teaches, we're not going to be reading text and theology. We're going to be reading queer theory, and we're going to be talking about queering God and queering Christianity, where the term queer literally means, according to those pundits believing that, an identity without an essence.
Yeah.
So there is no such thing as human nature. There's no such thing as male or female. Knowledge is a social construction of reality for the postmodernist. And there's no such thing as the nature of God. God himself is fluid. And so it's, as someone once said, that we were created in God's image, and we've been trying to return the favor ever since.
Yeah, creating him in our image.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me, because you just connected some dots for me between the British invasion, as we've been calling it, or the influx of naturalism, and let's reduce everything to the hard sciences, is almost a necessary step to get into all this nonsense. Because if all that exists is nature and its processes, and Jean-Paul Sartre was one of the first to see this, then you just exist. You just are. You aren't planned. There's no telos. There's no human essence. There's no God who puts you on planet Earth for a reason. You just are. And so Sartre famously inverted Aristotle. Existence precedes essence, said Sartre. For Aristotle in the Bible, you have an essence. Particularly for the Bible, you have an essence to know and glorify and obey, enjoy God forever. But if there's no God, there's no one to build an essence into us, so you just exist. Now you get to invent your own essence. You create the meaning of your own gender. You create the meaning of life. You create your own meaning. It's all social constructions. If there's no God, so you see, my point is the British invasion was essential to the French and the German and the Italian invasions being able to pick up momentum, because by denying God, we now functionally get to be the sovereign meaning makers of our own existence, which is, it's the same old lie from Genesis 3, right? You
Yeah.
can be like God, knowing good and evil. And so I'm interested
A Feuerbach statement that all theology is nothing more than anthropology.
Projection. Yeah.
Projection.
Yeah. You project a supersized version of yourself
Yeah.
into the sky. And
Yep.
so how does all this make it into the church? You said ecclesia. How does this stuff start capturing the imagination of Christian influencers, Christian pastors, Christian professors? How does it go from civil society into ecclesia? Why do you have Christian professors now at Christian universities articulating the same ideas that strike us as so deeply?
Gosh, a couple of things there. The average Christian, first of all, Mark Knoll wrote the book about 30 years ago, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind, which is to say there's not much of an evangelical mind.
That's the scandal.
And Bertrand Russell said most Christians would rather die than think. In fact, they do. And so we just believe it and become zombies and go with it. And so we, living in the menace of mindless Christianity over the last century, are just bait for that kind of stuff. We love God with our hands and our hearts, but not our heads. And the sentiments, again, since we still have the heart, and that tends to drive a lot of evangelical Christianity these days. Abraham Lincoln said that public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And so I think when we go back and we think about Aristotle and about the art of rhetoric or the art of persuasion, we have logos, ethos, pathos. Well, the academics among us, we focus on logos. That's in apologetics, Christian philosophers, theologians. It's all about persuading the mind. But not everyone gets persuaded by the mind. They're not really the thinking type. They might be the feeling or the doing type. And with respect to the sentiments, that's how this second, as I would call it, second ideological revolution sweeping the American universities that we Christians founded initially, is not dry, doctrinal, sciencey stuff. It's wet and juicy justice stuff. It's about the underdog. It's about the passions, about defending those who are oppressed and so forth. And so the average Christian who emotes rather than thinks easily gives into this, because we also have a theology of original sin. God hates sin. God hates oppression. Somehow we make those two things the same. Oppression just is sin. Sin is just oppression. And then we say God is love. Love is love, like water is water, whether it comes from the tap or the toilet. No, we think love actually means something, but instead we're not thoughtful Christians. We give into this sentimentally and emotively, and we put up the rainbow stickers. And then as far as the academics, they were the ones who should have caught this stuff. But I think, there is something to human nature, one, that we all like the approval of men. We all like to, as scholars, think that we are cutting edge. That's the goal in scholarship. You've got to be able to have something that's sort of an original contribution. You've got to be out there ahead of the pack. And all of a sudden, in the seminaries, it's tempting to find something that is appeasing to the larger body of scholars out there that are already imbibing this stuff.
So the need for social approval can drive our theology descending into madness.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us think that we are more objective than we are. Yeah. We do have passions. We do have desires. We have belief desire sets.
Yeah. I wonder if you've noticed in your decades of ministry, this is something that's become increasingly clear to me working in the space of dealing with social justice and thinking biblically about all the questions of race and sexuality and all this stuff. I have found people's personal traumas, like they had a bad experience with an abusive man. And now along comes an entire ideology that says the patriarchy's out to get you. And then politicize it in a way that it gives, it's almost like politics is therapy, if that makes sense. This is the first time I'm putting words to some of this stuff that's been swimming around in my head, but politics, there's a reason we've seen sort of the rise of, what's the stereotype, like the blue-haired screaming into the,
right.
the darkness because, you know
how they voted.
Yes. And to me, that just strikes me as fundamentally cruel, because if a little boy, if my son, Henry, gets bit by a spider, that trauma might, let's say it's a pretty gnarly spider bite, might rewire his brain for arachnophobia. Now, if I can sit him down and be a good dad and say, hey, man, just because one spider bit you doesn't mean you can still sleep in your bed. Even if there's a daddy long legs under it, they're harmless to humans. Like, I can try to ungeneralize his pain such that the world doesn't begin to feel scarier to him than it actually is. To me, what you're describing in the second wave of the university revolution kind of thing, one of the reasons I think it takes off with young people is whatever trauma they've been through, it gives them a way of now generalizing their personal pain into a grand meta narrative, a grand story of, okay, this dude hurt me. Now I can lash out and get some kind of revenge. And I have a place to funnel all of this resentment towards the men, because they're, especially white men, they're the oppressors. And I look at that and I just say, what a twisted mind game. Because if I took my spider-bitten son and I sent him to Twitter or TikTok, or I sent him off to college, and he's sitting under professors who are saying there are spiders everywhere, and he's on TikTok watching videos of people with spider bites, and he watches some progressive podcast that's telling him, yeah, man, these spiders, and if anybody denies to you that there's spiders everywhere, that's definitely a spider. Like, that is such a way of messing with people's minds that sucks them into the vortex of the ideology. That is why, statistically, I did an article on this recently, mental illness is just skyrocketing. Obviously, it affects all areas of the political spectrum, but particularly the further left you go, the more mental illness skyrockets.
True.
And so I'm wondering, this can all be a depressing conversation for people to eavesdrop on, but how does Christianity cut through all that? Like, you're a Christian apologist when you're spending a lot of time on university. I mean, Ratio Christi has chapters all over the university world. Tell us a little bit about that and how your ministry helps people. What do you see actually breaks the spell? What is the smelling salt for people who've been duped into this?
Well, it's, we like to say we have two ears and one mouth for a reason, so that we listen more.
Yeah.
If someone needs a hug, we give them a hug. If they need an argument, we're the ministry on campus to give them an argument. But what we're finding when we do surveys on the campuses, the bigger questions people are concerned with now isn't like, is Christianity true? Yeah. Is it good? And is it meaningful? And so people sometimes don't even care about truth because the philosophy in deconstructionism, in postmodernism, is that truth is what my peers will let me get away with. Knowledge is a social construction of reality. They're not sure if truth exists anyway.
Yeah.
They want something that's meaningful, that is intuitively good. And I think what this current revolution that we're in, and we are in a cultural revolution, it's a soft revolution. It's the one that Gramsci predicted and talked about that needed to happen before a frontal assault and a main revolution could ever come. They need to ensconce their ideas, not just in academia and in media, but also in ecclesia.
Are you a Lord of the Rings guy?
I like the Lord of the Rings.
I like the Lord of the Rings. Me too. And I've been doing some deep dives with this YouTube channel, and they made an observation that I think is salient to our conversation. They were saying that evil has a way of devouring itself, and the way they broke it down was, if you think of that iconic scene of Frodo and Gollum in Mount Doom. Right, there's the Ring of Power. They're about to destroy it. And Gollum bites Frodo's finger off, right? Gets his precious back. And in the Peter Jackson version, Gollum looks up, there's this top-down shot, and he's leaping for joy. He finally found his precious. And then he sort of slips, and Frodo takes him over the edge, and that's that. He falls. But this fellow Lord of the Rings nerd was saying that the way Tolkien wrote it, it's much more clear that Gollum's fascination with evil actually led to self-destruction, that it wasn't so much accidental that he slipped. He was so fixated on this evil thing that he had made precious that evil ate its own. Evil devoured, evil incinerated the people who had taken hold of it, which is a deeply biblical principle that Tolkien's tapping into there. So I'm wondering, as you engage this stuff culturally, does it bring you any hope to see that a lot of what we're up against? I know you're working to bring a third revolution in education, right? We've talked about the first, the second, and you're trying to usher in a third, which is taking back the institutions with a true, good, and beautiful worldview, Christianity. Does it give you any encouragement that some of what you're up against, given the nature of evil, is inherently fragile? It's inherently self-destructive. Do you see that playing out? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, ideas have consequences and bad ones have victims, right? We hear people say, good ones transform lives, societies, and civilization for human flourishing. And I think what we're seeing right now in our culture, there is a little bit of pushback, and it's not just legal pushback. We have a new sheriff in town in politics, but there's a number of people who are, for the first time in a long time, this is no longer an abstract choice. They're seeing what a culture, an entire culture might look like if they buy into these new ideas. And it's been so moving that it's caused people like Richard Dawkins to want to call himself a cultural Christian. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali, his, Padawan, so to speak, to actually go full in and convert, because she said, look, you're my mentor, but atheism could never ground the things necessary to human existence,
led to nihilism,
like the meaning of life and morality. And so now Dawkins, like Steven Pinker in his book, Enlightenment Now, wanting that revolution to come back, says we need to guard against the two enemies of Enlightenment thinking, and that is religion on the one hand and socialism or Marxism on the other hand. Well, Dawkins is coming in saying Islamism on one hand and socialism or Marxism on the other hand. So either way, people are getting a taste now. Once you burn Christianity down, as they tried to do, they're getting a taste of what that's going to look like. And Dawkins loves the fruit of Christianity, but he thinks he can get this fruit indefinitely from the supermarket shelves as if he doesn't have to get it from the root.
Yeah.
And he can't. And there's many people like that. You're finding, Tom Holland, an agnostic Christian.
This book's right over your head there, Dominion.
There you go.
See in big letters. Let's try something fun for a second. Because you and I are both trying to keep our finger to the pulse of shifts in culture. The narrative under the rise of what I'm calling the French and German invasion and what you're calling the second wave, the second revolution.
Second revolution.
The narrative of that was it sort of didn't care whether Christianity was true or not. That was more of a concern for the first revolution. How can we prove Christianity appealing to evidence and empirical, factors and whatnot? But it shifted from, we don't really care if Christianity is true. We care whether it's good. And there it's weighed and found wanting. Christianity is just bad for civilization. It's bad for trans people. It's bad
hateful,
for
harmful,
black people.
oppressive.
Christianity is the white man's religion. All that stuff.
Yeah.
But now, man, how shocking is it that an atheist like Tom Holland or an ex-atheist thought leader of, the new atheism of the early 2000s, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, is now, I got to meet her a couple months ago,
I'll be with her people tomorrow.
Oh, will you?
Yeah.
I mean, she loves Jesus now. We're at this tipping point where the story is fundamentally shifting from Christianity is not only not true, and that question became less and less relevant as the second revolution took hold. Well, it's not good. It's mean. It's bigoted. It's phobic. It's hateful. Now that seems to be getting taken down by Glenn Scrivener's book is behind me right here, The Air We Breathe, How Christianity Gives Us a Foundation for Equality and Justice and Compassion and Consent, and all these things. John Dixon out of Australia, his book's over there behind you. He builds a case that human rights and all these beautiful things come from, they're flowers that sprout from Christian soil. Then you have, obviously, Tom Holland is sort of the figurehead of this. So what hope do you have in the next generation that everything we've been talking about with the second revolution, the Gramsci, the Marcusas, the Marxism, that A, it's going to buckle under its own weight because that's what evil tends to do. But B, what hope do you have and what are you doing with Ratio Christi and your ministry to get us to hopefully that brighter next chapter?
Well, if Christianity is true as we think it is, and if we have a platform to be able to debate it or dialogue over it, and we can show real examples, I think we win. And right now you're seeing that not just at the highest level where a Jordan Peterson is knocking at the door, calling himself an existentialist Christian, Elon Musk, a cultural Christian. You've got, Joe Rogan, talking about it and maybe even going to church now and so forth. People are seeing, they've got buyer's remorse. They think we went too far. I don't like that stuff. I'm not sure if I can swallow the root yet, but I do like the fruit. I think it is good for us. And even Dawkins now calls it the divine spy camera theory, admitting that Christians do good things, even if they do it falsely because there's no God, but it's like a divine spy camera, they think, watching over them.
Yeah.
But everybody now is having to come to grips with what Christianity has done to make the world a good place. What we're seeing on the campuses is there is a spiritual interest. The boys are coming back, you might say. I got interviewed by Fox News a little while ago on the question about the resurgence of what Charlie Kirk called the Lost Boys of the West. Are they coming back to church? And my take is, I don't know. I don't know where they're going to land. I know they're reacting against something. They're sick of being told they're toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, the best they can ever be is Homer Simpson one day. So they're sick of the feminization beating that they've been taking. But where are they going to go? Are they going to go to Jordan
Andrew
Peterson and
Tate.
Joe Rogan, or Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes? Yeah. Is it the late Charlie Kirk? I know the Gen Zers that I'm talking with are saying, look, Charlie Kirk, we thought that was the way. He was about dialogue.
Yeah.
They killed him. We need something more radical. And so you're seeing a radical push on the other side because in some respects they're desperate. But we are seeing a lot of people coming to Christ.
For a lot of folks, you're saying that's pulling them like hard right? Or you're saying we need something...
For some of them...
What would you say is the more radical thing than dialogue? What?
There are people, James Lindsay is one of them, that calls it the woke right.
Yeah.
I've gone on Sean McDowell's and Elisa Childers' podcasts to explain why I don't think there is, nor can there be in principle, a woke right. Not at the philosophical levels when we're looking at, the bedrock of what it means to be woke.
But you would say there was a phenomena of...
Yeah, the methodologies, the tactics.
Anti-Semitic.
Even if you want to take some people, the case for Christian nationalism, Stephen Wolfe, who says explicitly we need to use critical theory and turn it on its head and operate on the same methods. Yeah. He's just wrong. He's just wrong about that. You are finding a reaction on the right because they're sick of what they've seen. Some people are converting to Christ. They're going about it the right way. They're knocking at the door of the church. And if we're there and we have the answers, we can be used by God to bridge that in.
Yeah.
Other people are finding plenty of opportunity out there to become radicalized and fight back against the cultural revolution that we're in. But it's not to a good end, I don't think.
Yeah. So it really, if I'm hearing you clearly, we're at a fulcrum moment, a pivotal moment where as people are sort of waking up from wokeness, it's like, well, who do we follow? Who's going to lead us out of this? And it reminds me of Solzhenitsyn, who's right there, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when he gave his famous 78 Harvard speech. Towards the end, he says, we'll either be a Christ-seeking people or we will cease to be a people. And so what I hear you saying is, there's all kinds of people vying for Messiah status. Some people might look at Trump, he's the Messiah. Some people might look at Nick Fuentes. Maybe that hard right turn is the right way. Maybe the actual toxic version of masculinity with Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate. Yeah, sorry. That there's all these competing voices for this is the way out. And man, Solzhenitsyn had it right in 1978. We'll be a Christ-loving, a Christ-seeking people, or cease to be a people, which brings us full circle to your ministry.
Yeah.
Ratio Christi is in campuses all over the world. Give us a 60-second, what do you do? How can folks get connected to what you guys are doing there?
So at the high school division level, we have RC College Prep, and at the undergrad level, on the university campuses, over 100 campuses for undergrad, we do apologetics evangelism. We ask good questions. We take on tough issues that people are addressing, wanting to generate more light than heat. But we are Ratio Christi, not just Ratio Dei. We are the reason of Christ. We are a Christ-centered ministry on campus. We want to bring everything back to Jesus because we think Jesus is the reason that made the West best. And I used to be ashamed to say that because I was, pressured by the colonialist type, the post-colonialist movement. Yeah. But it is best. Otherwise, you wouldn't have millions of people trying to break into Western countries despite their problems at the risk of their own lives. But it's not because of secular humanism. Yeah. It's because of the Jesus revolution. And I think we need another Jesus revolution. And so I think it's true to an extent what Chuck Colson used to say, that changed lives change cultures. Yeah. But that only goes so far. So James Davison Hunter, in his book, To Change the World, says that takes it only so far. It really needs to get baptized by the elite. You can have grassroots start up, but it doesn't gain traction if it's not. Institutional recapture must happen. And that's why at our levels at PhD students and professors, we want to reclaim the intellectual voice of Christ in the universities. And so we're taking a cue from the cultural Marxists about the long march through the institutions. And we have a game plan that's 40 or 50 years in the making. It takes a long time for this to happen. But if we can fund enough Christian PhD students that get into top 100 universities, and their job isn't primarily doing apologetics evangelism like our high school or undergrad divisions are, but instead they're developing movements of young missional professors, train them up in the way they should go, and when they get older, they don't depart from it. We're going to get 40 years out of these people. And already, I just had lunch before coming here with our guy at UCLA. So we're at UCLA, at Oxford, at Texas A&M, at Rutgers, at Baylor, Florida State, University of Tennessee, other ones. And we're looking for 4 more this fall. But if we can be doing this consistently over the next 40 or 50 years, people say it can never happen. Well, look, the fact that the first revolution happened and they threw out the founders, Christians, shows that it can. And the fact that it's happening yet again, throwing out the first revolutionaries, shows once again that it can happen and it must happen. And where are we going to go? We're going to throw in the towel. We are the last frontier. And as goes the university, so goes the culture. As goes the U.S. university, so goes the world. So 1 in 3 world leaders got an academic degree from a U.S. university. This is the place to leverage the power and influence for the rest of the world at the universities. The internationals are coming here. We're seeing people come to Christ. The universities produce not just our political leaders, our government leaders and so forth, our business leaders, our media, but even our K through 12. My daughter is an elementary education major at Purdue University. And I ask her every semester to give me the syllabi for all of her classes. I can see the Marxism in there. And Purdue's one of the more conservative institutes. So even people who think, well, it's so bad out there, we should just send our kids to the Christian schools. No, because if she didn't have a father like us who regularly dine on this kind of thinking, she would be taking that stuff into the Christian schools. So it's incumbent upon parents and pastors to repent. And enough of the menace of mindless Christianity. We need a thoughtful Christianity. We need to be training up our congregation with scripture, theology, and good Christian philosophy. And parents, as hard as it is, who are now both working for, if it's not for ideological reasons that feminism has impacted, maybe it's just purely economic reasons. And we feel like we can't do it without 2 incomes. But what that means is parents are exhausted. And so they kick their kid off to the youth pastor who's ill prepared.
The statistics on that are gut-wrenching.
And parents and grandparents are
20% of youth pastors have a biblical worldview. Something.
Oh gosh, well for the senior pastors, it's 37%. But if you say evangelical non-denominational, it's 51 to 56%.
Which is the highest of any of the categories.
Of the categories, that's right. So you get the youth pastors. I've been that.
Children's pastors, and it's atrocious.
So we need to come back to following Jesus.
So you have
and that is loving God with our heart, soul, and mind.
And loving God with our minds, Ratio Christi has several resources for free. That are books on all the hot topics, not only how to address sort of the first revolution with some of the how do you prove God exists to somebody scientifically minded, but you guys have been cranking out such great material on more cultural apologetics, the second revolution, how do we speak and think biblically about race and sexuality and all that stuff. And the thing I love about what you guys do is not like, let's just find some rando to speak to this. If you're writing a Ratio Christi booklet, because they're all at about 11th grade level and about
25 pages.
So you find somebody who was living a gay lifestyle. If you're talking about is Christianity the white man's religion, You're getting a black PhD, and on down the line, and so that you're getting world-class scholars and thinkers as a resource to church, to pastors, to Christians in education. So let me just round out our time, because I know you got to hit the road here soon. You did get two things deeply wrong in your last comment. Number one, you said West is best. My family and I just went to Japan. They got the toilet thing figured out, man. Bidets are, we'll talk. I love Western civilization for a lot of reasons, but between Japanese steak, Wagyu and Kobe.
My son just spent the last 6 months there, and that's where he's going to find his wife. He's determined.
Between Kobe and bidets and Wagyu, they might give us a run for our money. But more seriously, to your point, that the strategy of Ratio Christi is to sort of tear a page from the strategic playbook of Gramsci. I would say Gramsci gave a cheap, counterfeit version of the Great Commission. Make disciples of all nations. Gramsci said, well, how do we make Marxist disciples of all nations? Brother, what you're doing, the valuable work you're doing to serve the church and to hold back the forces of darkness and hopefully have a brighter future for the West and the whole world. Gramsci is not the one you're taking a page from. You're taking it straight from Jesus and the Great Commission. And so
there you go.
So, hey, friends, if you enjoyed our back and forth, please do yourself a big favor. Pick up the Progressive Miseducation of America. I tore through this bad boy, and he talks about stuff that is on many of your minds. How do you maintain Christian credibility in the age of Trump? For a lot of people, that's puts a huge stick in their spokes, and they go sort of flipping based on what's happening politically. If you want a dose of sanity on how to think through all that, understanding strategically, that's one of the things I love about you. Did you ever take Strengths Finders? It gives you the things you're best at.
I think I took it once.
Well, I'll tell you, man, strategy is in your top 5 for sure. Dr. Corey Miller, very strategic on how as Christians we make an impact, push back the forces of darkness, let sanity prevail in a crazy age, and how to champion the true, the good, the beautiful that are all found ultimately in Christ. Thanks for joining me, brother.
Go team, go God.
Amen.